Welcome to the Grief Ladies, the practical guide to what comes next. I'm Kelly Daugherty.
And I'm Karyn Arnold, and we are two grief professionals with over 50 years of combined experience. We're here to validate, educate, and give you tangible tools you can actually use.
Each episode motivates you to take action and reminds you it's okay to want to feel better. This is the Grief Ladies, a guide to what comes next. Hello, and welcome back to the Grief Ladies podcast. I'm Kelly.
And I am Karyn, and we are here continuing our holiday series, working within our grief framework. So maybe you've been with us for a while, maybe it's your first time. Either way, a refresher is always a good idea. So Kelly, can you help us understand what the grief framework is?
Yes, so our grief framework is based on the word grief. So easy to remember, but grounding, rebuilding, interacting, evolving, and finding. And so today's topic is about evolving. So we're going to explore that trail marker of our framework. And what evolving really comes down to is some of the difficult emotions and self-esteem. Karyn, can you share a little bit more about that?
Yeah, well, I love the word evolving because I think it's something that we're all doing probably throughout our lives, but, especially through that grief process, where there's just so much changing and so much that we are trying to establish with, what feels like a very new and very different life. But there's a lot of emotions and feelings that come up with this, and certainly things that we explore with people. We have it kind of broken down into two parts. Sort of the one category is the what I call the roadblocks or the ugly emotions, the anger, the guilt, the regret, the resentment, and all of the challenges that we have with that. Those are the things that can keep us looping, I think, a lot. The stuff that we can be revisiting over and over again. And they're not bad for you. They're part of the process. I mean, I always say to people, like, trying to stop those or get rid of those is about as healthy and realistic as like trying to make yourself not be sad any longer. So, we want to help you find ways to explore these emotions as you're evolving through all of them, while not letting them, kind of swallow you up. With all of this, I think, is the idea of how your self-esteem and your sense of self-worth is also changing through grief. So, we're going to get to our questions in a minute, but Kelly, how do you think evolving and some of the ugly roadblock emotions, where does that come into play during the holiday season, do you think?
Oh, I think everywhere. I was thinking about those things like the anger, right?
Yeah.
Angry that your loved one is not here for the holidays. This podcast is coming out the day before Thanksgiving. And, we're supposed to be grateful on Thanksgiving. And for some people who, when they're grieving, that's really hard. They're not grateful that their loved one isn't there. And they're struggling with that. And, some of these emotions really can take up a lot of space on a regular day. But then when you add the compounding of the holidays, and wondering like what emotions should I be feeling and how do I deal with all of it? And the resentment, you get those holiday cards in the mail and you see everybody really happy and you're not feeling so happy.
Right. Yep. Absolutely. So, I mean, and that's stuff that I think is hard to say out loud. It's hard to admit it to ourselves. That's why I always kind of call them the ugly emotions, because we're not very proud of feeling that way. But it's, because we'll also do that thing where, like, I know I should be grateful. I do have family. I do have people checking in with me. If we are in that situation, there's the other side of this, I think too, though, Kelly, because we have to at least open the door to the fact that the holidays, as tough as they are, could have a moment or two of enjoyment,
Mhm.
of relaxing, of maybe feeling like ourselves for a few moments. What inevitably happens if someone has that opportunity, do you find?
Oh, they feel guilty for that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Is it okay to feel okay, right?
yeah,
And to have those small moments maybe of connection or joy or whatever that may look like. And feeling guilty about that because you're feeling joy while your loved one is not here.
yeah. Yeah. And maybe you did try to think of a way to honor your loved one, and maybe it was really lovely and beautiful and it helped you to kind of relax a little bit and you were feeling okay for a moment. And that's just the craziest thing about grief, because that is not long lasting, and then we question what it means to feel okay, and we don't feel okay about it. So, boy, there's a lot here. Well, we have a couple of questions that people had provided to us, and that's really what we're going to be addressing today. And so that's right along the line. So the first one, is it okay to feel joy or happiness when grieving during the holidays? So we're going to go into detail about that one specifically.
Yeah, and as I mentioned, today is the day before Thanksgiving, so we are doing a Thanksgiving question. And how can I be thankful on Thanksgiving when I miss my loved ones so much? Which I think that question, regardless of when you listen to this, you can find some benefit from that question.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree. I agree. All right. Well, give it a listen and we'll be back with some tips and some more steps to maybe take afterwards. So, Kelly, our next question, I think we both really like. Is it okay to feel joy or happiness during the holidays?
Yes, absolutely. And so what when I read that question, what immediately I thought of was the new movie Inside Out 2. And there is a scene about going down the memory lane and talking about how joy and sadness coexist, right? We can't have one without the other. And the reality is, we need to be able to oscillate in with our grief, right? Between loss oriented and restoration oriented, like the dual process model shows us. And we can't be in that loss oriented 24/7. It's too exhausting. And although we may feel like we're there all the time, I would challenge you on that because when I've asked my clients that say that to kind of take apart the day and find their moments where maybe they had some glimmers or they felt a little lighter or they felt some joy, they were able to identify those.
Mm,
And I think that's important because sometimes we feel like we're just so deep in that grief that that's all we can feel. But there are little moments, and you might have to search for them, and they might be really small, but they are there. And the holidays can bring out a lot of emotions for us. And there's a lot of good memories associated with the holidays. And so maybe it is as simple as what I do when I make my mom's chocolate every Christmas and I give it to my friends and I give it to my coworkers and everybody knows about my mom's chocolate. I mean, I'm using molds that are probably 50 years old at this point, and but it brings me joy. And it's something that I enjoy. And now I've been doing it with friends. So it brings that community piece to me. And it's just lovely. I mean, it's just really, I really enjoy it. And so it might be something like that, that, you know what? It's okay if you're making that Christmas meal and you're feeling some joy. Of course, there's no right or wrong way to feel.
yeah.
And if you feel like you can't feel that joy, that's okay as well. But if you have those moments, absolutely. Maybe you embrace them and sit with them a little bit. We do need to take breaks from our grief. We do need to have other feelings and experiences that maybe help us feel a little lighter. And that's
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. And it's really one of the big lessons in grief, I think, is how you're actually capable of feeling multiple things at a time. And I think that's really confusing for people. I think we kind of prefer our emotions to be one at a time, and it's like I'm having a good day or I'm having a bad day, and to have this mix. And I've had people say to me so many times, like, well, I don't know. I don't know if I'm happy or I'm sad. And I'm like, just be both. Two things can be true. Like, that is just such an important thing to remember, and we do have space for it, we're just not used to it. We're used to just having, like, usually one set of feelings about something. So we do have the space for it, and we are capable of that, and we don't have to be defining moments as good or bad, and maybe we can just be in them. I think the other really important thing to remember with all of this is not to allow those moments of joy to be followed up with guilt, because that is so often
So
what
true.
ends up happening. We have this kind of primary emotion that comes very naturally, very instinctually, and then we follow it up thinking it's wrong, and that I shouldn't be feeling this way or I should be doing something differently. So I do try to encourage people to just let things happen. If the guilt arises that, this is the only way I'm going to survive this is if I have those little glimmers. How can I get through this if it's nothing but darkness? Yeah.
And it is as simple as what you mentioned, is as simple as just kind of stepping back and checking in and noticing even what you're feeling.
Yeah.
Because you might be surprised. You might think, oh, and the more that we do that, the more aware we can be about how we're feeling overall.
Yeah.
Because I think, I'm tired. Well, what is the actual feeling that you're experiencing?
Right.
And
Yeah.
kind of try to tap into that and see, okay, Well, I'm feeling calm. Well, maybe that's a good thing, right? We
Right.
don't it doesn't have to be all these highs and these lows. Sometimes the beauty and the magic is kind of in that middle where things are more neutral.
Yeah. Well, and I was thinking about that as you were saying that, like, this word joy is big.
Uh-huh.
That's a big word. There may be people watching this, they're like, "I don't expect to feel any joy." Like, joy is too big. But really what we're hoping for are moments of maybe quiet, contentment, comfort, peace, even just embracing those moments that somebody, gifts you a fuzzy pair of socks and a blanket, and you really just get to embrace the warmth and the comfort of that. Um, those small moments, are very, very, very important because, as I'll often say to people, like, if we can piece enough of those small moments together, it starts to look like something that we can tolerate, you know? So joy, if you can find it, great. Definitely don't follow it up with guilt. But if nothing else, let's try to reach a point where we can find some peace during this time of year.
Yeah,
I think
definitely.
that's important. So, Kelly, if you had to summarize the question, is it okay to feel joy or happiness during the holidays? What would you say?
Yes. But I think, Karen, you brought up a really good point that I want to, reiterate is it's okay to feel that joy, but don't follow it up with the guilt, beating yourselves up for having that joy, right? And maybe just to try to get to that middle place where it's more contentment, calmness, peacefulness, just neutral.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be these highs and these lows, but just kind of step back, check in, notice how you're feeling, and whatever you're feeling is okay. There's no right or wrong. But if you do find some joy or happiness during the holidays, that's okay. That's a good thing because there is some, you can think about past memories, you can taste some good food, the smells, they can be really, really powerful reminders of what we had with our loved ones.
Yeah, absolutely. And those connections maybe are there that we're always looking for. So it is a time to embrace that too. So,
Are you ready to take the next step on your grief journey with real tools and compassionate guidance? The Grief Ladies are launching a brand new workshop series based on their signature grief GRIEF framework. 5 trail markers to help you find your footing after your loss: grounding, rebuilding, interacting, evolving, and finding. Each workshop focuses on one trail marker, guiding you through practical steps to move from surviving to living again, all in a space that's honest, supportive, and real. Led by grief experts Kelly Daugherty and Karyn Arnold, these workshops combine decades of experience with tools you can start using today. Visit griefladies.com to explore the upcoming workshops because you don't have to climb this mountain alone.
How can I be thankful on Thanksgiving when I miss my loved ones so much?
yeah, it is a good question and a fair one. I think the first time I actually really came across the idea of gratitude and grief was actually not around Thanksgiving. I was teaching yoga at the time, and gratitude is a huge part of yoga practice, and just having those moments and think about what you're grateful for. And I think generally, like as a culture, there's a very big push for gratitude. Like if you go to a home goods store, all the little wood signs you're supposed to put around your house and everything, and so it's definitely like an expectation now. And I was actually planning on doing a specific class for people who were grieving, in my yoga setting. And I kind of was getting to the part where I was writing the program, like, wait a minute, like, this doesn't feel fair, to ask grieving people to be listing what they're grateful for, because I think a lot of times people don't feel very grateful. I mean, the words I hear more often than not are I feel cheated, or I just feel shortchanged, or I feel resentful. And so it really becomes very difficult for people because there is that expectation, whether we're talking about culturally, but then especially now with Thanksgiving, and I'll be honest, I even have like a little be grateful sign that is one of my Thanksgiving decorations. But I do think about how hard, that is for people right now. So I think one thing to think about is that one, we can feel more than one emotion at a time. We're always kind of looking for one feeling to replace another, and like, should I feel grateful or can I grieve? And it's like we can do both, just as something can be a happy occasion and it can have an underlying sadness to it. We can be looking forward to something and then also be kind of dreading it or worried about how it's going to go. So I think making space for all of the emotions is a big part of it. Um, I also think really validating that, like, it's okay, to not feel very grateful. I think this gets muddied in people's minds because they do start to kind of list off, like, well, I have nice friends and I've got some good family. And, it's not like I have this, this, and this. They'll start listing all the other things that they don't have going on. And I think we have a tendency when we're in bad emotions to just pile on other bad emotions. And if we start to feel like a bad person, on top of everything else because I'm not being grateful enough, well, that's not helping anything. So, just validating that feeling for yourself, I think, is really important too. That if you do feel shortchanged, if you do feel cheated, you can be grateful for the people in your life and still wish that all of this hadn't happened.
I agree. I do talk a lot about gratitude with my clients. It is something that I encourage gratitude journals all the time because I think, like you said, you can have these two feelings and that's okay. And sometimes, what the research says about gratitude, right? It really can shift our mindset if we practice gratitude and something as simple as a gratitude journal, 3 to 5 things that you're grateful for that happened that day, not like overall, but maybe in every day. And I always think it's like, when we're grieving, that's really hard to do, but that's sometimes where the magic can be. And we can find, maybe it's just the day where you're grateful that the person held the door open for you. And maybe that's what you're grateful for, or that the sun was shining, or, that your sandwich was really good at lunch. Whatever it is, sometimes if we can shift our focus to just even the little things, it can change our perspective. And the research says, right, if we focus on gratitude, it does start to change the brain and we start to see more of the good. And I know, like, I remember early on in my grief after my mom, like Thanksgiving, I didn't want to be grateful for anything. And I totally get that and I acknowledge that. But I do think there is some magic and beauty in trying to find those small little things that you can be grateful for. And yes, you may not want to sit around the Thanksgiving table tomorrow and say all the things that you're grateful for and listen to everybody else's when you just want your loved one with you.
Yeah.
And that is totally normal. So maybe, you think about what I'm saying about the gratitude and that's something you maybe try after the holidays. Maybe you start to look at. And one of my clients, she was like, "Oh, Kelly, I don't wanna do this." Like, she's like, she was really, like, bitter and angry that I was even asking her to do a gratitude journal. Well, it helped her so much and it shifted so much for her that she's actually now published her own gratitude journal.
Oh my goodness. That's a big shift.
And so she talks about it in, like, the beginning of the book, like, I was told to do this by my grief counselor, and I did not want to." But how much it actually did help her.
Yeah.
And maybe if you wanna think about it even a little differently, can you think about the things that you're grateful for your loved one?
Yeah.
Maybe something you learned from them or a memory that you have with them. Maybe kinda try to think about it that way if you feel like thinking about the gratefulness in other parts of your life is just too much. Maybe you can think about that.
Yeah.
Maybe it's that you're grateful that they taught you something or it's that memory you have.
Yeah, absolutely. It is one of those very interesting contradictions in grief. And I always say there's a lot of those, where simultaneously, on the one hand, it's like, yeah, as I would suggest to a person, it's okay to recognize that you may not be feeling grateful. But on the other hand, finding gratitude is also a tool for healing. I agree with you. I think it can be either specific to your loved one. I love focusing on little things and small things. I always say to people, our life is really just made up of small moments. It always feels so big, but if we do just focus on small individual things and we piece enough of those together, it starts to look like something. And I think a gratitude journal can help with that. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's like recognizing first and foremost, of course, we wish our loved ones were here, and there's nothing that is going to change that. And we don't want to be talked out of that. We don't want that grief taken away from us. A lot of what I've talked about with people at the holidays, there's kind of that forced merriment. And if it feels like a forced gratitude, that doesn't feel very good. So this has to be something definitely that you do in your time and when you feel ready. And like you said, maybe even just as like a post holiday sort of thing, to be thinking about. But I do love that idea of the journaling. I think that's great.
So, to sum up
Yeah.
our video, Karen, how can I be thankful on Thanksgiving when I miss my loved ones so much?
Well, again, a couple of things, finding that balance between validating the loss, recognizing that you can feel all the feelings, you can feel the grief, you can try and feel the gratitude or hold on to something. And then going forward, even making gratitude part of a small practice, that can help you as you're trying to heal in grief.
Absolutely. Thank you, Karen.
Thanks, Kelly.
Well, those are really great questions and really important topics that our listeners shared with us. And I hope you found some benefit from them. And as we end every podcast every week, we love to have a step or a goal for the next week because we do believe there are things that can help you on your grief journey. And that's really what we base this podcast on is knowing that there are things that can help you. So, Karen,
Yes.
what is our actionable step and goal for this week based on our trail marker of evolving?
Well, I think one of the most important gifts that you can give yourself is just the acceptance of the full range of emotions. It doesn't have to be one or the other. We have this tendency to think that either I'm going to be sad or I'm going to be happy. If we can make room for all of it's just a lot more comfortable. We're a lot more capable of it than we realize. We can have moments of gratitude for people who are here, for the people that we love, for a pet. And that can exist at the exact same time as our very deep grief and sadness. I always say they don't have to elbow each other out. So let's coexist in these emotions through the holiday. Let's honor everything that comes up as valid. Let's not be ashamed of them. Let's not try to switch them and think that we should be doing it differently. And let's be as gentle with ourselves as we can.
Yeah, self compassion is key.
Yep.
You may have moments of suffering and sadness, and that's okay. And it's also okay to have moments of joy and connection.
For sure.
So, thanks for listening.
Yeah.
And next week, we are going to continue with our trail markers and go to F, which is finding. And we're going to explore ways to honor your loved one that's meaningful but manageable. So,
Yeah.
stay tuned and take care. Thanks for joining us on the Grief Ladies.
Don't wait to feel better to get started. Getting started is what makes you feel better. Put this week's tool to work.
If today's episode helped, share it with someone who needs it and leave us a review. We'd love to hear from you.
And remember, we're here for you, your trusted grief ladies, navigating this path together.